This is the Bobby Moore Communications Network. Freedom of speech. Use it or lose it. And greetings, friends around the world, throughout the universe, whenever and wherever you may be. This is Bobby D. Moore. But before we begin today's program, I would like to tell you about the great new series of entertaining, educational, and informative videos which we will soon be offering. Until now, we have offered only audio CDs. But we are now in the process of creating video CDs which will soon be available to you. Keep watching for future announcements. Our subject for this time is once again usury. That is, money charged for the use of money. The term usury in Hebrew is nesek, and it means the biting, as from a serpent. The Koran describes it as all-consuming or devouring. Here's a quote from Horace Greeley, 1811 to 1872, and Mr. Greeley says, "While boasting of our noble deeds, we are careful to control the ugly fact that by an iniquitous money system we have nationalized a system of oppression which, though more refined, is not less cruel than the old system of chattel slavery. As Napoleon pointed out, and we quote, terrorism, war, and bankruptcy are caused by the privatization of money, issued as a debt and compounded by interest. Napoleon canceled debt and interest in France, resulting in his struggle with the Rothschild syndicate, which through finance, even at that time, controlled all the European nations. Now, let's take a look at what the Bible has to say about usury. The love of money is the root of all evil. Timothy 6:10. If thou lend money to any of my people that is poor by thee, thou shalt not be to him a usurer, neither shalt thou lay upon him usury. Exodus 22:25. Take no usury of him, or increase. Thou shalt not give him thy money upon usury. Leviticus 25:36 and 37. Unto thy brother thou shalt not lend upon usury, that the Lord thy God may bless thee. Deuteronomy 23:20. The rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is servant to the lender. Proverbs 22:7. The stranger that is within thee shall get up above thee very high, and thou shalt come down very low. He shall lend to thee, and thou shalt not lend to him. He shall be the head, and thou shalt be the tail. Revelations. It's the same fatal bite of that old serpent, the devil, and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. The rich, the usurers, rule over the poor, and the borrower is servant to the lender. Proverbs 22:7. For a Bible example of cancellation of debts to moneylenders and restoration of property and money to the people, read Nehemiah 5, verses 1 through 13. That's a good one. Jesus Christ had scathing remarks for the Pharisees, that is, the priest bankers and usurers who worked from the temple in Jerusalem, in Matthew 23. He exposed them for what they were: hypocrites, sons of hell, blind guides, fools, full of robbery and self-indulgence, whitewashed tombs full of dead men's bones, full of hypocrisy and lawlessness, partners with them in shedding the blood of the prophets, serpents and a brood of vipers, a den of thieves, a synagogue of Satan. Revelation 2:9. Ye are of your father the devil. He was a murderer from the beginning. He is a liar and the father of it. Even at the ancient temple in Jerusalem 2,000 years ago, the Pharisees, the money changers, used the temples to collect interest. Jesus was so upset by the sight of the money changers in the temple, that is, the priest bankers who worked from the temple in Jerusalem, that he walked into the place, knocked over their tables, and beat them with a whip made of cords. As far as I know, this is the only time Christ ever displayed violence. Can you imagine yourself, or anyone else for that matter, walking into a bank today and displaying such behavior? Why, you would be shot so full of holes, well, man, it wouldn't be a pretty sight. Well, what, pray tell, could have caused such aggression from Jesus Christ, one whose message was that of peace? Well, here's how the story goes. For a long time, the Hebrews had been called upon to pay their temple tax with a special coin called the half shekel. How about that, a temple tax? What next? This temple tax was to be paid with a coin consisting of exactly 1/2 ounce of pure silver. And in order to be acceptable, there could be no image of a pagan ruler on it. As far as I know, it was a completely smooth coin. They claimed that this was the only coin acceptable to God. Actually, it was the only coin acceptable to the Pharisee bankers. There was a limited number of the coins in circulation, so the money changers enjoyed a monopoly and a true buyer's market. They were thus able to raise the price of these coins and make huge profits from those who came to worship at the temple. Jesus called them a den of thieves. And Christianity is not alone in its condemnation of usury. Hear what the Quran has to say about it. And we quote, "O you who believe, hear God and give up what remains of your demand for usury, if you're indeed believers. If the debtor is in a difficulty, grant him time until it is easy for him to repay. But if you remit it by way of charity, that is best for you if you only realized it." Muhammad said, "A time will come upon people when almost everyone will eat from usury, to the extent that those who refrain from it will be exposed to its dust." In Muhammad's last sermon, he said, "Return the goods entrusted to you to their rightful owners. Hurt no one, so that no one may hurt you. Remember that you will indeed meet your Lord, and that He will indeed reckon your deeds. God has forbidden you to take usury. Therefore, all interest obligations shall henceforth be waived. Your capital, however, is yours to keep. You will neither inflict nor suffer any inequity." Well, so far we've heard from Horace Greeley, Napoleon, the Bible, the Koran, and Muhammad, and well, let's see what a bankster has to say about usury. Sir Josiah Stamp, former president, Bank of England, had this to say. Get this. "Bankers own the earth. Take it away from them, but leave them the power to create money and control credit, and with a flick of a pen, they will create enough to buy it back." We are now approaching the question of paper money versus gold and silver. In the meantime, bear this in mind. The United States Constitution, in Article 1, Section 10, clearly states, "No state shall make anything but gold and silver coin a tender in payment of debt." Gold and silver coin only. Article 1, Section 8, "The Congress shall have the power to coin money and regulate the value thereof." Who shall have the power? The Congress shall have the power to coin money and regulate the value thereof. And now, as I always say, the plot begins to thicken. Listen to me. Representative Wright Patman, former chairman of the House Banking Committee, said, The Federal Reserve banks create money out of thin air to buy government bonds. The Federal Reserve Bank is a total money-making machine. In other words, someone might be inclined to allege that the Federal Reserve Bank has a monopoly on counterfeiting money. In 1913, testifying before the Senate Banking and Currency Committee, Mr. Alexander stated, end of quote, "But the whole scheme of a Federal Reserve Bank with its commercial paper basis is an impractical, cumbersome machinery. It's simply a cover to find a way to secure the privilege of issuing money and to evade payment of as much tax upon circulation as possible, and then control the issue and maintain, instead of reduce, interest rates. It is a system that, if inaugurated, will prove to the advantage of the few and to the detriment of the people of the United States. It will mean continued shortage of actual money and further extension of credit. For when there is a lack of real money, people have to borrow credit to their cost." Nefarious Senator Nelson Aldrich, one of the co-conspirators of the 1913 Federal Reserve Act, had this to say, and we quote, "Before passage of this act, the New York bankers could only dominate the reserves of New York. Now we are able to control the reserves of the entire country." Former Federal Reserve Bank Chairman Eccles was asked by Senator Patman, "Mr. Eccles, how did you get the money to buy these $2 billion of government bonds?" And Mr. Eccles replied, "We created." "Out of what?" Patman asked. "Out of the right to issue credit money. That is, out of nothing." Mariner Eccles, who was chairman of the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System longer than any other man, was called to testify before the Joint Economic Committee in 1962. When Chairman Wright Patman asked whether the Fed has more power than either the President or Congress, Eccles replied, "Yes." This tops it all. A quote from a 1924 edition of the American Bankers Association Digest sums up what is currently happening. When, through the process of law, the common people lose their homes, they will become more docile and more easily governed through the strong arm of government, applied by a central power of wealth under leading financiers. These truths are well known among our principal men, who are now engaged in forming imperialism to govern the world. By dividing the voter through the political party system, we can get them to expend their energies in fighting for questions of no importance. Divide and conquer, Democrats or Republicans, a choice between Tweedledum and Tweedledee. Big money controls both parties. Think about it. And so until next time, this is Bobby D. Moore saying, goodbye, friends. Does God Exist is an hour-long CD, documented and verifiable, and has been called by some a revelation from God. Thousands of copies have been distributed since its creation, and it is now a collector's item. And now you can receive your own copy of Does God Exist free of charge simply by asking for it. All you have to do is send an email to bobbymoorespeaks@gmail.com and say, "Send me the CD." Tell us where to send it, and your copy will be on its way to you as soon as possible and as long as supplies permit.